The city was wrapped in an unusual silence that night. The streetlights reflected off the rain-slicked asphalt, casting a soft glow that contrasted with the darkness. Amid this quiet scene, seated in a small 24-hour cafe, was Ethan, a man in his early 30s, his gaze fixed on the cup of tea before him. He had spent the last decade chasing what he believed to be true success: money, recognition, status. But now, all of it felt empty. Something deep inside him was crying out for answers, for a greater sense of purpose. Yet he wasn't entirely sure what he was searching for. He only knew that he had to find it before it was too late. That was when he noticed an elderly man at the table beside him. Unlike Ethan, the man radiated a serenity that was almost tangible, as if he carried an ancient, unshakable wisdom. Ethan couldn't explain why, but he felt an irresistible urge to start a conversation. Perhaps this stranger held some kind of answer to the restlessness consuming him. And so, without planning, without realizing that his life was about to change, he took a deep breath and spoke the first thing that came to his mind. "Looks like you've seen a lot in this life." The old man smiled, lifted his gaze, and replied calmly, enough to understand that most people search in the wrong places. Ethan hesitated for a moment, but curiosity won. The old man, who introduced himself as Samuel, seemed to have all the time in the world. Between sips of tea, he began to share a story. There was once a man who devoted his life to amassing wealth. He believed that with enough money, he would finally find peace. But with every goal he achieved, a new restlessness emerged. One day, as he wandered through a forest, he came across a monk sitting by a river. The monk observed him for a moment and said, "You chase the wind and expect to hold it in your hands." The man didn't understand at first, but those words stayed with him for years, until one day, exhausted and empty, he finally realized that what he had been searching for was never in gold. It had always been within him. Ethan listened intently, feeling each word sink deep into his soul. He saw himself in the man from the story. No more words were needed. Samuel simply looked at him with a peaceful expression, giving him the space to reflect. In the days that followed, Ethan began to see his life through a different lens. His routine, once dominated by external goals and ambitions, now felt devoid of real meaning. He tried to return to work as usual, but something had shifted. The stress that had once fueled him now felt unbearable. He started asking himself, if all of this wasn't the real path, then what was? Amid his inner turmoil, he found himself meeting Samuel again. The old man smiled and, without Ethan having to say a word, asked, "Have you ever observed water?" The question seemed random, but Samuel continued, "Water doesn't fight against the current. It adapts, flows, finds its way without resistance, and yet over time, it wears down even the hardest rock." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He had always fought against everything, trying to control every detail of his life. But what if true wisdom lay in learning to flow? Driven by this restlessness, Ethan decided to travel. He went to a small temple in the mountains where he met other seekers like himself. There he encountered Olivia, a young woman who had left behind a promising career in the city in search of something more authentic. She shared her story with him. "For a long time, I tried to live up to other people's expectations. But one day, I realized I was living a life that wasn't mine." Her words struck a deep chord in Ethan. During his stay at the temple, he also met Thomas, a former businessman who, after an emotional breakdown, chose to step away from the corporate world to understand what truly mattered. With each conversation, Ethan realized that his struggle wasn't unique. There were many like him, searching for meaning beyond the surface. Over time, the lessons became clearer. He came to understand that peace doesn't come from the absence of challenges, but from how we choose to face them. That resisting the natural flow of life only leads to more suffering. That the search for something external to fill an internal void is an endless cycle. Samuel had been right. Most people search in the wrong places. Ethan realized that, like water, he needed to learn to adapt, to let go of what he couldn't control and trust the journey, even without having all the answers. The real turning point wasn't in what he found, but in what he learned to release. The morning was cold as Ethan walked alone to the top of the hill beside the temple. The silence was absolute, broken only by the gentle rustling of the trees in the wind. He took a deep breath, feeling a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. In the past few days, he had learned to observe his own thoughts without being consumed by them. The restlessness was still there, but it no longer controlled him the same way. Standing there, gazing at the endless horizon, something finally clicked. For the first time, he understood what Samuel had meant that night at the cafe. His search had been like trying to hold water in his hands. Everything he had been looking for had always been there. He had just never stopped to truly see it. As he reflected, he recalled a conversation he had with Thomas the night before. The former businessman had told him, "I spent years trying to build something solid, something that would give me security. But the real foundation was never external. It was only when I learned to trust the present without fearing the loss of control that I found peace." Those words now made sense in a way they never had before. Ethan realized that his anguish had stemmed from the illusion of control. He had always sought definitive answers, unshakable certainty. But life had never worked that way. The flow of things was uncertain, and learning to accept that was the key to finally finding peace. And then, as if the universe itself were confirming his revelation, it began to rain. Small droplets touched his face, and instead of running for cover, he simply stood there, letting the rain wash away everything he had once carried as a burden. He felt part of something greater, connected to everything around him. He no longer needed to fight against the flow of life. He no longer needed to search outside for what could only be found within. It was in that moment that Ethan, without the need for grand speeches or explanations, understood that he was ready to move forward in a new way. When he returned to the temple, Samuel was waiting for him at the entrance. The old man simply looked at him and smiled, as if he already knew what had happened. Ethan smiled back. There were no more questions to ask, no more answers to chase. He didn't know exactly what would come next, but for the first time that didn't scare him. He was exactly where he needed to be. The real, unexpected shift hadn't come from a dramatic external event, but from the quiet transformation that had taken place within him. Ethan left the temple a few days later, but something inside him had changed forever. He didn't return to his old life the same way. He had learned that true success isn't found in what we accumulate, but in the peace we cultivate within ourselves. That control is an illusion, and that life becomes lighter when we learn to flow with it. Like water, adapting without resistance. The relentless pursuit of the future often keeps us from fully living in the present. And that had been his prison for so long. Now, he understood that true transformation doesn't happen outside of us, but in the way we choose to see the world. The unexpected turning point wasn't about reaching a destination, it was about learning to walk with new eyes. And maybe that's the reflection we need today. How often do we focus on achieving something, believing that happiness will only come when we have more, when we reach the next goal? But what if true peace isn't out there, but within us? Like Ethan, maybe all we need is to pause, take a breath, and allow life to show us the way. There's no need to fight against the current, just trust and keep moving forward. If this story resonated with you, continue this journey with me. I'll see you in the next reflection. Until then, remember, the answer you're looking for may be closer than you think.